Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. This week on Time&Tell, one of our viewers has sent in his piece for a review. It is the Omega Seamaster model number 2254. It's the 5th generation of one of Omega's longest running series in current production. As our usual format breaks down, I'm going to go into specifics on this piece. I'm going to talk a little bit about history of Omega first, also the history of the Seamaster model, get into technical specifications on the watch, then pros and cons, and then as usual my closing thoughts. So let's get started. So let's talk a little bit more about the history of Omega, the company. In 1848, Louis Brandt had founded La General Watch Company in Switzerland. And by 1894, his two sons actually started in-house production, and they actually formed the subsidiary Omega. By 1903, Omega had spun off to become its own entity, and it really grew in popularity during World War II. Mainly due to the reliability of its movements, soldiers in the field found their actual, application of these timepieces to be quite useful. I also want to dig into a little bit behind the history of the Seamaster series. Initially launched in 1948, the original Omega Seamaster was more of a waterproof dress watch, and I personally feel it was a way to compete against Rolex Oyster Perpetual case of the time. They really pushed forward the envelope in terms of marketing, and as the series progressed, in 1956 they actually donated one of their watches to be strapped to the outside of an airplane that flew over the North Pole. They did this as a way to show that their watches were just as durable and reliable as one of the top competitors in the Swiss marketplace. What really helped them hit their stride was not only capturing the business of being the official timekeepers of the Olympics. I think a big boom in popularity came in the 1990s, and this is when Omega signed a deal with the James Bond series franchise, and an Omega Seamaster was worn on the wrist of Pierce Brosnan. Now, as a child growing up in the 90s, I feel like this really, captured my attention of this watch series, and it really was a good piece of marketing that still holds valid today, and I know that they're still very linked with the James Bond series all the way through the Daniel Craig and Planet Ocean versions. Now, let's talk a little bit more about this watch in particular. This is the Omega Seamaster 2254. This is the 5th generation and one of the longest running models that's currently produced by Omega. I'm going to break this down into a little bit more detail. Let's talk about specifics on this piece. Now, let's start with dimensions. This sits at 42 millimeters in diameter across the face of the dial, a thickness of 12 millimeters, a lug-to-lug or tip-to-tip measurement of 47 millimeters, and a lug width of 20 millimeters. I just think this size works so well for this piece. I mean, it sits very nicely under the cuff of a shirt. It has that sweet spot in size where it's not too large and not too small. It doesn't underwhelm or overbear the wrist. Now, while I'm a fan of the new Planet Ocean series, I think that this size is just sits a lot better, and it has more of a timeless classic look to it. Now, let's also talk a little bit about the movement on this piece. This actually features an Omega caliber 1120 movement, which is really a modified ETA 2892-A2. I think it's a very solid, reliable movement, hacking and hand windable. It works very well in this timepiece. Now, let's also remember this is a tool watch as well, a diver's watch, and it features the unidirectional dial used for timing underwater dives or timing anything in general. I just think that this look to it, it's got that classic retro vibe. So let's start with pros. I mean, again, I'm a fan of Omega, the Seamaster line. I just think that this dial is quite beautiful. I like the aluminum bezel and just the overall slimness of this watch. I mean, I put this on a NATO strap just because I didn't want to scuff up the owner's bracelet, but it just works so well with many different straps, and I know a lot of people don't want to put leather with their dive watches. I think for just a casual, dress down look, this can work very well with many straps ranging from leather, rubber, metal bracelets, NATO straps, Perlon. Just the versatility of this watch. It's just that's another thing for the aesthetics of it. I love that look. Also the dial. I mean, it's a very clear, legible dial. I like these sword hands that Omega's put on this face, and I have to be honest, I'm a bigger fan of the Omega Seamaster Pierce Brosnan 1990s version. I think that after wearing this for a few days, it's grown on me. I gotta say that I do appreciate this watch now after just seeing it in the flesh. And for those of you who are not a fan of it, I recommend at least trying it out, taking a look at it. And again, I'm mentioning, going back to the technical specifications, just the slimness of this piece. It just sits so well under the shirt that I honestly forget that I'm wearing it. And that's something that I really enjoy about these watches. If I don't feel it on my wrist and it just becomes a part of me, to me, that's just personal opinion. I prefer that over a massive, overwhelming timepiece. Now, just the whole lineage of this watch also adds to the appeal of it. Again, the 5th generation of the Seamaster line, you're getting a piece of history on your wrist. Now that I've gone over pros, let's also talk briefly about cons on this watch. The first thing I have to say is just general aesthetics. I'm not really a fan of the indice at 12 o'clock. I actually prefer the Seamaster James Bond version with the 2 stick indices at noon. It's just a minor personal gripe, but I just feel that has a cleaner look to it. The other thing that I'm not really a fan of is the turn feature of this bezel. I've handled Rolex Submariners all the way down to Seiko Monsters or Seiko SKXs. I think Omega's really lacking, especially in this series, on the functionality of this bezel. It doesn't turn as crisply, and it's very tough to get a grasp on. You really have to come in at an angle. Again, those are just minor gripes. I mean, a lot of people actually wish that they made this version in a ceramic bezel. Going back to what I've said in earlier videos, I'm more of a fan of alumina. I do like ceramic, don't get me wrong, but I just think the alumina adds a little more appeal to it. I just wish, again, that this bezel was just easier to turn, but out of all things being said, that's a very minor gripe of this watch. And before I forget, I also wanted to talk about the helium escape valve on this dive watch. Now, the theory behind this is it's actually pretty interesting. As divers take these watches underwater, helium gas tends to seep into the watch itself, and when you're underwater with that pressure, there's no real issue, but as you begin to surface, that helium can actually damage the timepiece. So engineers have actually designed this tool or this feature to allow for the release of that helium, also relieve pressure on the watch itself. I think it's very interesting that they've taken that into account for practical applications. Just a little bit of a tidbit, in this watch video. I want to give you a little breakdown of how these things can actually be used out in the field. So I think that's pretty interesting. I also quickly wanted to go over this bracelet that the owner received with this watch. Now, this is the standard Omega Seamaster bracelet with one modification. The clasp was actually replaced with Omega's new style, I guess their version of the glide lock clasp. And let me see if I get this in focus for you guys. And what's great about this is there's no micro adjustments, but what you can do is, similar to the glide lock from the Seamaster series, you push down on this button right here, and you can see it releases to extend or shorten the bracelet itself. No tools necessary. I think this should be standard on all Omegas moving forward, and I believe it is for a lot of the models. It's just, look how easy that is. And the main logic behind this, just like a NATO strap, is these watches are meant to be worn underwater, and if you're wearing a wetsuit, this just adds the in-field adjustability of the watch. I just wanted to share that with you guys, and I do recommend, if you do buy Omegas that don't come with this glide lock extension, it can be purchased from the Omega boutiques. I think it's just a great addition to the bracelet. Also, standard in Omega fashion, it comes with solid end links, good solid connection. I have to say it's a very good bracelet indeed. And it goes very well with this timepiece. And there you guys have it. That's been my review of the Omega Seamaster 2254. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please feel free to share it and hit the subscribe button below. And I look forward to talking to you guys soon on Time and Tell. Take care, guys.